our friend of the Lotus Eaters, lying, demented feminist Jess Phillips, is a minister now at the Home Office, despite running cover for armed Muslim mobs intimidating a female Sky News journalist on camera. And she and Matthew Rycroft, who's the senior civil servant at the Home Office, were asked by other civil servants. I can neither confirm nor deny that I know people that work at the Home Office who listen to this show and are asking all the right questions. But they submitted questions to Phillips and Rycroft on an online forum and got no answers. One civil servant wrote, quote, "When comparing with other countries, the UK seems to be quite weak in its ability to monitor crime rates compared with other factors such as migration. Do you think the monitoring of the nationality of perpetrators in the UK, as well as of victims, could confirm or refute whether the UK has experienced the same issues as, for example, Sweden, who have discovered that immigrants are 2 times more likely to commit crimes in comparison to those born in Sweden?" Miraculous, my friend. Excellent question. It has also been noted this increase in crime includes severe crimes against women and girls, with the majority of convicted perpetrators being born outside Europe. Now, you would think, as the Home Office Minister for Violence Against Women and Girls, this should be in Jess Phillips' remit, but she's only interested in the safety of women and girls when it's used to demonise the white heterosexual host majority population, and not when it is to do with, for example, Pakistani Muslim rape gangs that have been operating in her and her colleagues' constituencies historically, which many Labour officials covered up, because it looks bad, of course. The question received 31 likes from other Home Office officials, so you guys can stay in your jobs. But the department's permanent secretary, Matthew Rycroft, chairing the discussion with Phillips, refused to select the question and put it to a minister. Another question was asked by civil servants seen by GB News. What is your view on the ability of the UK to deport criminals? GB News understands this question was ignored by Rycroft. So they keep memory holding the fact that they have this data and will not publish it. Always remember, it's a deliberate choice that they don't put this out there. Because I remember Patrick Christie's show tried to get the data on some of this stuff, and their FOI request was responded to by the Home Office saying, can't do it, too expensive. Then they offered to pay the fees for the time taken to compile and publish the research, so it would cost the government nothing, and they still said no. So they just don't want it out there, and they're just going to try and keep you in the dark, because otherwise it incriminates them, should literally incriminate them, for subjecting the native British population to a deluge of people eager to financially, physically, sexually exploit them and their children. And this is only, as well, for the criminals we know are here, right? Because we already do know that there are 10,000 foreign criminals in our prisons. Because Richard Tice highlighted this to the Justice Minister, Shabana Mahmood, and asked, well, you're releasing all these prisoners early to make them lifelong Labour voters, as some of them said. They're violent criminals. Why didn't you just deport 10,000 foreign nationals currently in prison? Whether they entered illegally or not, they've committed a crime, so should be sent back. Why didn't you do that to free up all those prison spaces? And she just goes, oh, we are deporting them. Actually, as we found out in this debate, they're deporting them at rates far lower than not just pre-pandemic, but even the Blair and Cameron years. So they're being incredibly soft. But anyway, Neil O'Brien reminds us in this debate. He says, when the Prime Minister was campaigning to be the leader of the Labour Party, he signed a letter calling for the suspension of a flight to deport 50 foreign offenders to Jamaica and the suspension of all such future charter flights. 151 Labour MPs signed that letter. Among those who escaped deportation were Ikiva Heaven, a heroin dealer who had already served 4 years in prison and went on to be jailed again in May 2021 for dealing cocaine and heroin. If that's not bad enough, one of the other criminals who Labour members so generously campaigned on behalf of was Ernesto Elliott, who went on to commit murder. The Prime Minister has recently claimed that there is a, quote, racist undercurrent which permeates all immigration law. So the point is that the Labour Party under Keir Starmer want limitless immigration because they have an ideological belief in an egalitarian human nature and believe that if just the far right stop noticing differences and complaining about immigration policy and how much it's costing us to house and feed these rapists and murderers, then there will be no rape and murder. Everyone will just be as British as you and me. We'll all live in a socialist utopia and sing Kumbaya. This was also revealed by another Labour MP, who, again, like all Labour MPs, is not too bright, Fred Thomas. So Fred Thomas got up and gave his little speech, and Lee Anderson, now Reform MP for Ashfield, decided to interject with a question about the slogan "Smash the Gangs," and how Fred Thomas responded is very revelatory to Labour's attitude to illegal migration on the whole.
But sadly, the one set of people who we know do not care about that loss of life are the smuggling gangs who are responsible for putting people on these terribly overcrowded boats. That is why, to tackle the small boats crisis at its source, we must smash the criminal gangs. Unfortunately, we are... Yeah.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. We keep hearing this slogan, smash the gangs. Does he not realise that when you smash a gang, there's another 20 gangs ready to step into place to take that gang's place and carry on the people smuggling? What we need in this country, I'm sure he will agree, is a deterrent, is to get people to stop wanting to come to this country in the first place.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I think the UK is, for me, the best country in the world. I don't think we should try and make our country a less good place so that fewer people want to come here. That's not the route to go down.
Can I intervene on that?
Yeah.
So he wants all of these thousands of foreign nationals currently breaking into the country to be here, just quibbles about the means by which they're getting here, probably because they're taking a dangerous journey and some of them end up dying, often because they have knife fights in the dinghies, or two idiots got into a dinghy and decided to use shovels as paddles, pierced their own dinghy and couldn't swim. So he wants all these people here. So Labour's border policy is not a question of reducing illegal channel crossings, it's regulating all of those crossed into safe and legal routes to ensure the number can keep going up. And it can actually go up even further because then people won't die during the crossings. And also the government can pocket all of the money rather than the criminal gangs. So all of this whack-a-mole against all of these trafficking gangs, it's just a great big distraction against the fact that they're going to increase illegal and legal migration, and they're going to fold the illegal migration as best they can into legal migration. Because no matter what, people still come illegally because they are criminals and don't want to be subjected to background checks, if the borders even still do those anymore. But Labour will increase overall migration. It will not be, as Carl said before the general election, based Starmer and a purely pragmatic means cracking down on immigration levels. It will go up because they're ideologically demented and all of their MPs are a few clowns short of a Harris rally. Anyway, Lee clearly making the point here he should be in charge of Reform UK. But before we get on to Lee's other contributions, Conservative MP Nick Timothy decided to reveal the total cost of Labour's asylum plans. And he said, just before the summer recess, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said her policy was instead to consider the asylum claims of all illegal immigrants subject to the retrospective duty, and admitted in the impact assessment, if not in her speech, that meant granting asylum to up to 70 of them. And I will put Lee's comments here, because here you see Nick Timothy say illegal immigrants. The entire debate is about illegal immigration. What you hear a lot from Labour MPs and the Home Office is irregular migration. It's just numbers we didn't expect. If we can just incorporate them into the managed stream of migration, then suddenly, because no human is illegal, they become regular migrants. And so them being here is just a settled fact. It's not a consideration of culture or of economics or of logistics. It's just whether or not they get here by small boat across the channel or by airplane. As long as they've got their passport given to them and stamped at the E-gates as you enter Britain, they're as British as you and me remember. Well, Lee Anderson says, the most important thing for me is to get the terminology right. They are illegal migrants. They are young men coming into our country. Quite frankly, people can say what they like about me. I do not want these people in my country. They have broken into our country. They have thrown their documents away. They are undocumented. We do not know where they have come from. We do not know what they have been up to in their own country. We do not know whether they are criminals. We do not know what their intentions are when they get here. Lee sounding much stronger than even Nigel, who's sitting next to him these days. Remember, Nigel refused to commit to deporting these people in an interview with Stephen Edgington. Hopefully he changes his mind on that. But anyway, look, back to Nick Timothy's statement. Remember, Yvette Cooper wants to grant asylum to at least 70% of all the illegal immigrants in the country. At the moment, the acceptance rate is 80%, according to Neil O'Brien. She claimed by making the change, she would save the taxpayer $700 million a year for a decade. The numbers were a result of what we might call the Reeves method, because they were a work of political fiction. Remember, Rachel Reeves plagiarised a lot of her book from Wikipedia and admitted to doing so, and is now the Chancellor. Yippee! The Labour policy excluded massive costs from welfare bills and categorised them as housing policy, which it admitted as significant and that it could undermine this impact assessment. Yet, the results of the impact assessment were presented to the House of Commons as unquestionable fact. So they themselves say their own impact assessment is basically fabricated, but they're then going to make policy off of it and claim it's a good thing. Fantastic. The impact assessment reveals the real government policy to deal with the huge number of claims by accepting them, and to deal with the cost by hiding the numbers from the public in the welfare system. So, yet again, they're going to collect data, it's going to increase, but they're going to obscure the data by putting it into that category of the stuff that the Home Office feels it doesn't need to publish to protect the safety of the applicants or whatever it is. So, unless people go through with ridiculous FOI requests, it's going to be a long time till we procure the exact costs of what this turns out to be, especially as the small boats numbers go up. But Nick Timothy does model it for us shortly. So, he finds the Home Office admits that 63,053 illegal immigrants previously due to be deported will have their asylum claims heard, and up to 70% of them, so that's 44,137 people, will be successful. But it also admits that for those refused, quote, the timing and scale of removals is highly uncertain, meaning they'll remain in the country and we'll keep paying for them, and that, quote, the Home Office may continue to support a number of them. Read all of them. These figures are just the beginning, because they apply only to one cohort of migrants, with a duty to remove unlikely ever to be implemented by Labour. Unless the Minister corrects Nick Timothy by naming a start date, the Home Office admits its policy, quote, is expected to increase the number of asylum claims, which, quote, consequently increases costs. So the Home Office, Yvette Cooper, comes out and says, by admitting all of these asylum applicants, at least 70% of them, just with blanket rubber stamping, we're going to take them out of the system and save you money. But the Home Office says this is going to incentivise further asylum claims, which is going to incentivise further people being put up at the expense of the British taxpayer while they're being processed, and more people crossing in the long run. Then they're also going to create safe and legal routes for specific countries to apply from their countries and be flown out at taxpayer expense, rather than cross the channel with their own money paying a criminal smuggler. So that means, despite Yvette Cooper saying costs are going to go down, they know that they're going to go up. Great. Instead of facing deportation, hundreds of thousands more migrants, young fighting-age men, will stay here for good. The policy is to shift migrants from the Home Office budget, the costs of which are published clearly, to the welfare and local authority budgets, the costs of which are not published clearly. So it's just about hiding the numbers. Because at the moment, we get Home Office numbers. We have to wrestle them out of them, but eventually FOIs get there in the end. But we don't have stats for local councils, and it's going to be harder to collate the data because it's more dispersed. Think of the painstaking exercise that Jenrick and O'Brien had to do to publish their Centre for Policy Studies report, and how seismic that was to the argument that immigration is a net fiscal good. Well, now, you're not going to be able to get the data to make that argument, and that's the Labour government's aim. It's to stop anyone from embarrassing them publicly just by publishing the truth. And the reason this is going to be hidden in the welfare budget is because, in the impact assessment, it says, quote, any asylum seekers who are granted asylum will have full access to the welfare system, and that local authorities will, quote, also incur costs. So, Nick Timothy says, lacking in transparency is this approach that the impact assessment says the Home Office has, quote, not been able to establish a generally usable figure. Well, they know how much the average illegal immigrant costs on asylum. They know that it's going to go up. They've got the figures for the number of people awaiting processing, and they've got a 70% figure that we've been able to work out means 44,000, upwards of them, are going to be processed. So they know the number that's going to be spent. And so Nick Timothy decides to run the numbers. He also mentions that the Danish studies about the Middle Eastern, North African, Pakistani, Turkish, and also most sub-Saharan African migrants were shown to have a net cost of £10,000 per year each to the Danish government. And the University of Amsterdam study calculated the average migrant cost the Dutch public more than £400,000 across their lifetime. It's going to be much more than that in the UK, I think. But on that basis, he calculates that for those granted asylum in this one cohort, the 44,000 people, the lifetime cost of Labour's new policy is £17.8 billion. That's much more than the £7 billion figure cited by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, which she said was the cost of the duty to remove policy. Now remember, Dame Andrea Jenkins, in a parliamentary debate just before the general election, the recess, and the reforming of Parliament, said that the asylum budget in the foreign aid budget was 14.4 billion. So that 17.8 billion looks to be atop the existing amount. So what's that? 31 billion? 32 billion? And increasing because there's going to be more asylum applicants, because if you give people free money, you incentivize them breaking into the country and languishing on welfare at my hard-working expense. So the Labour government is going to balloon and double the asylum budget with their promise to smash the gangs, because they're just going to rubber stamp visas for fake asylum applicants who broke into the country in the first place. Now, when asked directly about this, the Minister for Border Security and Asylum, Dame Andrea Eagle, said to Nick Timothy, "I have not seen the letter to the honourable gentleman, but I'm happy to write to him if he wants a further explanation." How can you be the immigration minister and not know your own figures? Or are you just lying to cover for the fact that it looks very bad for your colleagues? Because it seems by hiding the figures that they want to do that. So one can only suggest that the costs for illegal immigration are going to keep going up. We're going to keep paying for it, and it's going to be an even harder time to get the numbers on just how exploited the British public is. Thank you for watching that clip from Tomlinson Talks. If you liked that and you would like to see more, you can get the full 90-minute show every week on a Wednesday afternoon, live from 3 p.m, only on lotuseaters.com, and all of the other content that my colleagues produce behind the paywall for as little as £5 a month. Thank you very much for supporting us, and I hope to see you there. Until next time, goodbye.